Welcome to the DFS Jags PGA Golf Show 2021 Tour Championship DraftKings bets, picks, the final event of the year, the absolute end of the PGA Golf season. Before we get started, remember, like, sub, and throw us a comment down here below the video. I am Tony Altieri, your host, and with me always on the line, the DDS of DFS, Dr. Riku Mukherjee. Rick, what's going on, man?
Hey man, how you doing? It was a pretty fun tournament last week.
Yeah, we talk about these FedEx Cup events, how they're different than normal events, especially when we get into no cut season and we start trimming down the field. It gets more difficult to get excited because odds get kind of wonky. DraftKings gets kind of difficult, but we both had very, very good weeks. Obviously, we both had Patrick Cantlay. I also had Bryson DeChambeau, but we were pretty. And it was other than the fact that we both had hits last week, it was a pretty interesting tournament the way that everything unfolded all the way through the playoff.
Yeah, that was one of the most exciting tournaments of the year. I thought outside of a major, it was. I was like, I was glued to my seat. I just couldn't stop watching. It was the swings in the playoffs were just unbelievable. And like you said, we both had Cantlay tickets. We both had Bryson tickets.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were sitting pretty as far as an outright market goes. I actually even hit first round leader. I had a Burns and Rom, both of them, and ended up getting chopped three ways with Rory sneaking in the first round. But it was definitely a very, very good week betting wise, and the tournament was just spectacular. They put on a good show. Some people don't usually like birdie fests like that, but I thought it was a pretty fun. It was a very exciting tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the course was spectacular. I think really the conditions were the difference, right? I think if that course doesn't have the water, doesn't have the weather, it's much more difficult. Balls aren't sticking on fairways, they're not sticking on greens the way they were that day. The thing to me that I think that I was most taken back by in the playoff was the way that both guys played. Both guys were pretty good off the tee, but the approach game, I mean, Bryson was sticking approaches to like 6,
Mhm.
8 feet every time. Cantlay was all over the place, but the difference really was the way that they putted. I mean,
Yeah,
Cantlay did not miss a putt the entire time, and
yeah.
Brooks could not hit a putt to save his life, especially, I mean, in moments where he had great opportunities for birdies and to put pressure and to close the thing out. The guy could not hit a birdie putt.
Yeah, Cantlay set the all-time record of strokes gained putting since the ShotLink data started being taken back in the early mid 2000s. So he just had an out-of-world putting experience, and I don't really expect that out of Cantlay, but he just couldn't miss a putt on Sunday. You think with somebody like Cantlay, when he was gaining so many strokes putting off Thursday and Friday, they're a good fade for the weekend. But he rode that hot putter from Thursday all the way through the playoffs, and it was a spectacular putting performance. Like on the 18th hole in regulation, when he had that 20-footer, and then Bryson had a 10-footer, and the only way they go to a playoff is if Patrick Cantlay makes it, and then Bryson misses it. I just had a feeling that was going to happen. I was like, I think this is just gonna happen. Cantlay's going to make, Bryson's going to miss, and we're going to go to a playoff to determine it. And lo and behold, it happened. And the playoff was exciting. I had never seen such a swing in live betting odds during the playoffs. When Cantlay hit it in the water on the par three on 17, and Bryson hit it to chipping range. Bryson had a live odds of -1,000, and then didn't end up closing out the tournament. He flubbed his chip, and they ended up moving on to the next playoff hole. And the next playoff hole, Bryson hits it into the water off the tee, into the water at 18, and Cantlay's like -1,000 to win the tournament, and he couldn't close it out on that hole. Bryson gets up and down from like 150 yards, and then yeah, just the tournament was it was spectacular from on Sunday. I mean, it was a two-man race. No one else was really in it, but
Yep.
it was a really good Sunday. It was a fun watch.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned that only two guys really were in it down the stretch, but I mean, there were points in time where both Sungjae and Rory were within 3 or 4 strokes, and they were like plus 200 to catch him,
Mhm.
and they never could. They could never make up any ground in the live betting odds.
Yeah.
And it was exciting. I mean, both guys went about it, had a totally different approach to the way they were scoring and how things were playing out. For me, Bryson, I could just tell the guy was internally, he was just melting down, missing these putts,
Yeah.
and it started on 17, and then it just kind of continued. I mean, when he ended up lipping out the putt on 17, he was like, he literally bent over and like, what the f is going on
Mhm.
right now? You could
Yeah.
see it. It was a close up on camera, and everything that was happening, the crowd, and we should mention that one of the moments during the playoff, I think it was the second or third playoff hole. There's a
Yeah.
point in time when Bryson's standing over the ball, getting ready to hit his shot, the approach shot into the green, and somebody yells from the crowd. And you actually have a story about that.
Yeah. So, my co-host for the fantasy football show, Chris Caldwell, he was actually at the tournament. He was there with his good friend Brian Snyder, and I was just watching the tournament, and then Bryson's hitting his approach on the second playoff hole, and he takes a backswing and stops and backs away and looks in the crowd, and everyone's like, "Oh," and like booing or whatever. And then Chris texts me right away. He goes, "By the way, that was Brian standing right next to me who yelled in the middle of Bryson's backswing, and then they kicked him out of the tournament." So that was pretty funny. And yeah, they apparently kicked him out of the tournament. The officials they cursed him out like when he was like leaving and stuff like that. So he was just being drunk and dumb. But yeah, he called me afterwards. He was like, "Yeah, man, I can't believe I got kicked out of a golf tournament." I'm like, "Yeah, you were stupid. Why are you yelling in the middle of Bryson's backswing? You don't do that."
I
But
know. It was
yeah,
it was funny because it was loud on TV. I mean, it was
yeah,
dead silent. You hear this random jerk scream something from the
yeah,
right side of the screen, and
yeah.
Bryson literally stops and looks away, and you hear the crowd react to it, and you're like,
Yeah,
you
he's
text me,
a
you're like, that was my buddy Brian.
yeah. I've known him for a long time. He runs Ravens road trips all over the country. I'm actually going to see him in a couple weeks in Vegas when he's there for the Ravens game. And yeah, he's in general a pretty loud guy, and especially when he gets drunk, he gets even louder. So I'm not surprised that it was him. If I was actually thinking about it, I would have even crossed my mind thinking that was probably Brian. And yeah, I got the confirmation from Chris, and it was pretty funny. But yeah, Bryson. You're right. He was mentally melting down like hole by hole. I mean, it even started on like hole number 14 when he was like getting ready to hit an approach shot. He like backs off and turns to Cantlay, and Cantlay, he's like, Cantlay, Patrick, can you please stop walking? Like that whole interaction right there, like it was like obviously like something was getting to Bryson mentally, and he always seems to have this mental thing happening to him. And then that hole was awesome because Cantlay buried a 20-foot birdie putt right in his face as soon as he said that. So yeah, the battle between those two, it just seems like there was a lot of animosity during that round, and they're about to be Ryder Cup teammates in a couple weeks, and who knows? Like it just seems like whoever you're going to pair with Bryson has to be like the most cordial guy, probably like Tony Finau or somebody like that. But yeah,
Yeah, it's funny. There's a couple key things that I took away of that kind of revolve around Bryson. One, obviously, the announcement that the commissioner of the PGA and the PGA has now made a rule that you can't yell Brooksy anymore. That was the story all day in all of the podcasts, on all of
yeah,
the channels, through all of social media. That's all anybody wanted to talk about was how can you choose this one thing to just tell people you can't say this anymore at the tournament? And whether it was Bryson that initiated it or it was the commissioner doing what he thought was necessary to protect their biggest star, because whether or not the PGA wants to admit it, Bryson is the biggest draw in golf
hmm
right now. Everything he
absolutely,
does, good, bad, and different, it gets a ton of publicity. People are all over it, and it could have been their attempt to try and protect him. Me personally, I think Bryson probably went to the commissioner or to someone after the tournament, especially with the interaction that happened with him and a fan immediately following the end of the playoff, and was like, "I can't do this anymore. This has got to stop." And that was the PGA Tour's reaction, regardless of how it went down. Like you and I are talking before we jumped on air here, all it's going to do is encourage people who had any inclination or didn't like Bryson or the way that he approaches things or the way that he carries himself. It's just going to encourage them to do more of it. I
yeah,
mean, people live to fight against rules and regulation, especially when you start pouring liquid courage down the old suck hole
hmm
on day 3, day 4. That's only going to make people get louder and want to do it more often. So, I don't know how things are going to play out this week at Eastlake, whether or not you're going to see a rowdy crowd. It doesn't tend to be there. I've been at the Tour Championship 2 times, one when Tiger won, and then when Rory won. And it's a much different feeling because it kind of feels like the tournament's been decided before it actually happens.
yeah.
Um, So I don't necessarily see that happening this week, but as we stretch into, the next tour season, I think all it's going to do is shine an even bigger spotlight on Bryson. All of those things that you talked about, that
Mhm.
that mental anguish that he's going to, it's just going to get accentuated as more and more people are starting to nip at him from all different angles.
Yeah, I'm frankly sick of it completely. To be completely honest with you, this whole Bryson Brooks thing, like I'm just tired of it by now. I wish they would put it to bed. I wish they would figure out a way to put it to bed. I wish they would, maybe they can do something at the Ryder Cup, like in the locker room. Maybe they can come out together and make a statement. I don't know, like do something to put it to bed. But I don't really see what the advantage there is for Brooks to do that. Brooks doesn't really care. He just lets the crowd do whatever he wants, and he's kind of like a bro, so he like eggs it on a kind of. So he doesn't really have an advantage of putting this to bed. But I think for Bryson's sake, they got to do something to put it to bed. I mean, people get so dumb and yelling Brooksy and getting in his head and stuff like that, and it's got to end at some point. I don't really know what the end game. It was fun for a while, and we had chances to nip it in the bud and stuff like that, but it's been carrying on for so long now that I just want it to end at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, you transition to my next point, which is the Ryder Cup. Inarguably, the US has the best team, and this has been the storyline for, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 iterations of the Ryder Cup, that the US team is so much better on paper, the individual golfers, than Team Europe, but Europe continues to win, and we have the same dynamic that's kind of bubbled up again, where the US team is filled with stars, but nobody likes Patrick Reed, nobody likes Brooke, or nobody likes Bryson. Brooks and Bryson hate each other, Cantlay and Bryson hate each other. So you have this, all of these individual guys, no real chemistry.
Yeah,
And so you wonder if maybe the play in the Ryder Cup is to bet Team Europe, regardless of what the stats say and how things look on paper. Team Europe plays as a team, which is
yeah,
so important in this event. And the US, despite all of the artillery, everything that they have, the fact that it's at Whistling Straits and it benefits the style of play that most of the US players have, you just wonder if those team dynamics are so important that the US isn't going to be able to overcome, that chemistry that they absolutely do not have in the locker room.
yeah. The chemistry is just it's just hell and heaven difference between Europe and USA. And if I wasn't biased, I would bet, like if I was completely objective about the situation, I would easily bet Europe. But I can't do it. I always root for USA. I want them to win. But yeah, the bet is Europe. They're plus money odds. I think that's a good bet. Their chemistry is, there's just no one on that team that dislike each other.
Yeah, they'll get
There's,
along.
yeah, they all get along. We saw last Ryder Cup with Francesco Molinari and Tommy Fleetwood being like the most like lovable like pair like you could ever see. Like they're like shooting commercials together. Like it's just beautiful. And then, like you said, in the American locker room, you have everyone hates Patrick Reed. Patrick Cantlay hates Bryson DeChambeau. Brooks hates Bryson DeChambeau. Who doesn't hate Bryson? It's just
Yeah,
like one thing after another. So much animosity that it just ruins the team building of, that you need to rally around your country and win the Ryder Cup. But we'll see how it pans out. We'll do a whole Ryder Cup show and talk about it more in depth once we get the captain's picks. I think they're coming next week, so we'll know how it's going to pan out as far as the teams go.
absolutely. We'll get to the Ryder Cup. We will be doing a show, and it's a great transition into this week. Like I
Mhm.
said, the last week of the PGA Tour season, the Tour Championship. The course is East Lake Golf Club. It's right outside of Atlanta. It's a Donald Ross course. It's your typical Donald Ross. It's a par 70. It's short yardage. It's Bermuda greens. It's all the things that are kind of the earmarks of Donald Ross golf and design. Last year champ was DJ. He won it at 21 under. And we do have funky kind of starting stats, and I'll get to that here in a second. Historically, what we've seen out of the winners at Eastlake, barring any 10-shot lead that anybody may be handed, is ball striking. Off the tee is important because there is some water. Fairways gained. We've seen guys who can put the ball in the fairway, give themselves positions into holes, very important. Par four scoring, and then of course proximity, especially those key distances where you're going to see shots come, whether it's par fours or par fives, 175 to 200. As I mentioned, there is a weird dynamic to this. For those of you who don't know, because this is the third time this has happened in the Tour Championship, basically Tiger's year that he won it was the last year where it was basically a two tournament or a two winner event where someone could win the tournament, a separate person could win the cup. And so the PGA Tour came in and said, nah, we're going to change that and we're going to add this staggered start. So what we have is handicapped starting. Basically, Patrick Cantlay, who goes into the tournament as the leader in FedEx Cup standing points, will have a 10-shot lead over the last man in the tournament, which is the guy who's in 30th place, which is Patrick Reed. And we still don't know if Patrick Reed's 100% in. Rick, you'd pointed out that on his Instagram, he's pointed out that he will be in Atlanta, so it looks like he will be playing. But Patrick Cantlay will start the tournament at -10. Bryson will be -8, Finau 7, Rahm -6, Cam Smith -5, Justin Thomas, Spieth, Answer, Harris English, and Burns all at -4, and then down throughout. In the two iterations of this tournament where we've had guys start with staggered strokes, DJ won it last year. He started at 10 under. He won it at 21 under. There really was never a moment where he wasn't the leader in that tournament. And then the prior year, Rory actually won the tournament. He started at 5 under, and I think he shot 13 under through the tournament.
Yep.
He ended up winning the event, despite the fact that he started at a 5-shot disadvantage to the leader, which was Justin Thomas.
Yep. It's an interesting format. I'm still not too sure how I feel about it. I don't really know if there's a different way what they could do to figure out the FedEx Cup. I really didn't like it when it was, Justin Rose winning the FedEx Cup, Tiger winning the Tour Championship. I wasn't a fan of that, so I do like the fact that we have one winner of the FedEx Cup who wins this tournament. So I do like that. I just don't know. The staggered start, I guess, is okay. I guess it's a good way to determine it. I just feel like the only problem that I have with it I feel like anybody like that's starting at like -3, like 7 strokes back, like I don't think
no
they
chance.
I don't think they have any chance of winning the tournament. You could say someone like Justin Thomas or maybe even someone who can get hot like Sam Burns starting at -4. You could say that they could go on like a birdie streak and shoot a really low 4 days, but even then it's like super hard to like win the tournament. So I think it really comes down to the guys that are like -5, -6. We've seen Rory do it for -5. So yeah, it's fine, I guess. I mean, who cares at the end of the day? I mean, what is the FedEx Cup? It's not a major. We don't really care about it too much. It's just an extra $15 million for a bunch of millionaires. So it's cool to watch. It makes things on DraftKings a little weird because they do include the starting strokes in making the salaries. Like we see, for example, like Patrick Cantlay, coming in at 13,400, which is the highest of the year compared. Like we never see anyone up that high. Like it's always like in the 12,000 range. So yeah, it's an interesting format. I don't mind it. Maybe in the future, if they could do some sort of match play or figure something out to like get it down to like the top 8 or something and have them battle it out match play wise, that would be kind of cool. But I guess this is what it is, and it makes a really interesting week for DraftKings and for betting. Like we'll get into in a minute, there are two books are taking 2 ways to bet this tournament. You can bet them with the starting strokes, or you can bet them without the starting stroke, as though the field starts at all even par, which last year DJ won the tournament, but Xander actually shot the lowest tournament score last year. So that was fun. I actually had a ticket on Xander to shoot the lowest score overall in the tournament. So I typically like betting the tournament that way just because it's a little bit easier. I just don't like the odds with the starting strokes. But yeah, it's an interesting week. It's a good course. It's a good finishing course for the season. And we can jump into it now.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump right into the DraftKings lineups. As you can see, above $10,000, the top of the board. You mentioned it. Patrick Cantlay, who starts with a -10 strokes in his pocket to begin the tournament. He starts at 13-4. John Rahm, Bryson, Finau, Thomas, DJ, Jordan Spieth, and Cam Smith round out the guys above $10,000, as well as the guys and we would consider to have the best chance to win the tournament if you're taking into consideration the starting strokes from -5 all the way down to -10. For me, we talked about a little bit before. The argument is to take John Rahm or to not take John Rahm. That's really what it comes down to on DraftKings, right? He's going to be the most heavily owned guy. I think he is the odds-on favorite, both with strokes and without strokes, to win this tournament. And in my mind, he has been the best player on tour all year. He is the player of the year this year, in my opinion, as well. Too, he would have multiple wins this year if it weren't for the fact that he tested positive for COVID at the Memorial. So you could take one of those Patrick Cantlay wins and hand it to John Rahm.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that's really where the argument lies is, are you going to go in with 35-40% of the people and have Rahm in your lineup, or do you take the chance of fading him to gain ownership and leverage on the group? Because leverage is really at a severe premium this year, or I should say in this tournament, compared to any other tournament this year, because there's only 30 guys.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's John Rahm or bust up here. It's you have to make that decision. Him starting 4 strokes back to start the tournament, I think, is nothing.
Yeah.
When you're playing DraftKings, they do take obviously if you have Patrick Cantlay in your lineup, you're going to have the highest amount of points to start the tournament, but that does not necessarily mean you're going to have the highest point to end the tournament, as we saw actually. A couple years ago when Justin Thomas was starting off and stagger start. You know who was second that year? Patrick Cantlay was second in strokes that year, and he shot like 9 over the course of 4 rounds. So, yeah, it really doesn't mean much. As we said, Rory McIlroy made up those 5 strokes pretty easily. So, do you think that John Rahm can keep this up for one more tournament? Make up those 4 strokes and win. Yeah, I think he can. I think he has good history here. He's always played pretty well here. It looks like he's had a 6th, a 13th, an 11th, and a 7th at this tournament. So pretty good history. Good course design for him. I like John Rahm up here. I think he is the play up here. But if you don't want to play John Rahm, there are a couple options here to go to some lower owned guys. You could go to Jordan Spieth, who's coming in pretty low owned. You could go to Cam Smith, who's coming in pretty low owned if you believe in these guys. Me personally, if I'm not going to play John Rahm from the top of this lineup, I do think I have an inkling to play Tony Finau. Tony Finau has been playing really well the last couple of weeks. We obviously know he won the Northern Trust. He shot a 63 on Sunday at Caves Valley, so that was a very good sign for his game, turning it back around after winning a tournament. So I do like Tony Finau. He's starting 2 strokes back. He is in second place in this tournament right now. So I definitely am going to go to Tony Finau and John Rahm up here. The other guys I'm not too high on.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I'm going to take a hardline stance and fade John Rahm. I've been fading him all year because of the ownership fact. I have not bet him all year. I have not been using him in DraftKings because it's so hard to construct things around him. This week is obviously an outlier because we have guys priced in the 5,000. So you can construct with John Rahm. It's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem for me is the ownership. He's going to come close to hitting 40% ownership in most major tournaments.
Yeah.
And that's just, to me, again, if I want to gain any leverage at all, that's the spot where I do it, especially at the top of the board. I love Finau like you. He will probably be the guy that I turn to in most of my lineups. The other guy that I'm at least thinking about just from an ownership standpoint is Jordan Spieth. He's definitely not been playing very well. The last 3 or 4 weeks, he's really started to come back apart. The off the tee game has just gone back to where it was the last couple of years, instead of the elite off the tee game that he had been showing here all the way through the Open Championship. So there has been some regression there. The other guy that you could throw out there is Cantlay, and I recognize he doesn't have the best course history here. He's coming off of a win. But when you're talking about, basically a half or a third of the ownership of a guy like John Rahm, you're going to have to pick and choose your spots. And like I talked about previously, if I'm going to pivot, I like to pivot at what I would call these lower floor, higher ceiling spots, the higher price points, because it's just a better guy. You're getting a better guy, and the options in those spots are better. I love Finau just like you, and I think I may end up taking some shots with both Spieth and Cantlay at the top of the board, and playing more chalky guys, down the board that I think a lot of people are going to be on. And good. You were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say it's hard for me to click Cantlay's name this week. He's coming off of a win. He had an out of world putting week last week, so he has bad history at this course. He's the highest price guy in this field. He's not coming in super low owned, so even the ownership's kicking in with him a little. If I was going to go to anyone else, the guy with the best history at this course in this range is Justin Thomas. Just rattling off his finishes here. Last year, third, ninth, seventh, second, sixth. The guy finishes in the top 10 every year at this course. So I do like JT this week also, but he is also coming in high owned. I mean, you gotta realize that most of these guys are going to be coming in high owned. They're the highest, the best players in the world, the best players like in the field. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. The best thing to do when you're constructing your lineups this week is, if you don't have a low owned guy in your lineup, leave money on the table. Don't be
Yep.
scared to leave like 1,500, 2,000 bucks on the table. It will make your lineup different. So in GPPs, but yeah, I can't lay this week. I think I'm gonna be a full fade on them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. His tournament history here is terrible.
Yeah.
It was all putting last week, and obviously there could be some regression back to more normal Patrick Cantlay type numbers on the putting greens. So I understand where you're coming from there, and I think some of the options down the board are why a lot of people are choosing not to go with Patrick Cantlay. You mentioned Justin Thomas and his history, but as we get into that second tier, the $8,000 to $9,600 range, which is obviously very, very condensed from where we're usually seeing guys, we've got a good group of guys, and leading off is not who you would think would lead off the top of the board in terms of highest priced in this range, but Abraham Answer at 9,600, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Harris English, Sam Burns, Colin Morikawa, and Victor Hovland. Really a dichotomy of guys that are rising and falling. Sam Burns has become kind of a shooting star over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. He's played his best golf. We're back on his best putting surface. Guys like Colin Morikawa and Hovland, who, for different reasons, just really haven't lived up to the hype. We talked about Justin Thomas here a second ago and his course history. The only other guys that can say maybe they have better course history than Justin Thomas is Rory McIlroy and Xander Schauffele, and both of those guys are here below $10,000.
Yeah, and they're coming in as expected, super highest owned. I think that's probably going to be two of the three or four highest owned guys on the slate, which isn't surprising. I do love Sam Burns this week. He is back on Bermuda, which is his best surface. He has been just oozing confidence this last few weeks, and I think um, just harping back on the Ryder Cup a little bit, I think that if he has a really good week this week and sneaks in the top five, maybe even wins the tournament, maybe. Um, I think that could maybe get him onto the Ryder Cup team, which is pretty important to him. So he's already stated how important it is to him. So I really, really like Sam Burns this week. His ball striking has been unbelievable. He's just, he has this unbelievable mustache that he's rocking right now. He just looks so good on the course. Like it put him and Cam Smith in a group together. You have like the coolest looking guys on the course with their hairstyles and mustaches. But I do like Sam Burns. But yeah, the staples. The most of the people that are going to be making lineups this week are going to go to Rory. They're going to go to Xander. These guys have just literally owned East Lake. Xander has stated multiple times how this course reminds him of like San Diego, and Rory we just seen him just dominate at this course, and Xander too. Obviously, he's won has shot the lowest round score of the week twice. So yeah, those are the going to be the high owned guys. I mean, you can try to put them in your lineups and go overweight on them, but the guy that I'm going to be super overweight on is Sam Burns for me in this range.
Yeah, I like Burns a lot too. Obviously, a lot of people do. So his ownership is getting an uptick. To me, if I'm going to pivot anywhere, it might be to Morikawa. Morikawa did fairly well the first time that he's here. I understand that he's coming in with, this narrative that he's got a back injury. Obviously, he did not play well last week. Probably the worst tournament that we've seen him play in a good 2 or 3 months. Hovland's another guy who every single week he comes in, with a lot of buzz, a lot of ownership, a lot of people wanting to play him. And he just hasn't lived up to the hype here the last few weeks. The guy that really nobody's talking about is Abraham Answer. And Answer has been playing fantastic. I mean, he played absolutely lights out last week. He finished, inside the top 10, all the numbers of what you would expect from Answer, ball striking approach off the tee. And, you got to think if it sets up for a course, like this for a guy like Xander, that it's got to set up for a guy like Answer. So I
Yeah.
think from a pivot perspective, if you're looking to gain some leverage on the field, the guy I would turn to is Answer, but it's so hard to argue with not taking Rory and Xander.
Yeah.
Both those guys are just it's freak show status how good they are at East Lake, especially Rory.
Yeah, I think like we were just talking about, I think the most common build this week is going to be either Rom or JT up top, and then Rory Xander as your second and third guy. And because you can do that potentially, because
Yeah.
there are guys in the $5,000 range that you could sneak into your lineup. So I think that's going to be the most common build. So if you do start your GPP lineups that way, if you do start Rom, Rory Xander, make sure you pick really different guys at the bottom to round out your lineup to make it a little bit different.
Yep. As we drop down kind of into that third tier, this is a pretty big tier. It goes from 6,000 up to 7,800, and it's headlined by Brooks Koepka. Obviously Brooks hasn't been playing the best as of late, but he has flashes where he has a round or a day where he just plays fantastic. Also in this range, Louis, M, Scheffler, Kokrak, Hideki, Corey Connors, and then at the bottom at 6,000, Kevin Na. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the chalk in this range is Im and Scheffler. Im played again lights out, like I mentioned with the answer here last week, getting a lot of buzz, and then Scheffler's the other one. You talked about that common build, which is going to be either Rahm and Thomas at the top, and then Rory Xander. The next two guys in are likely Im and Scheffler. So you could have 25% of the people in GPPs playing a lineup that starts John Rahm, Roy McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Scotty Scheffler, or Sung J M. Like
Yeah.
that's going to be the first four guys in the tournament. So to your point, you're going to have to get different. Is this a spot in this range that you feel comfortable getting different? Because like nobody's talking about Louis right now.
Yeah, it is. It's a spot where you can get different. And the guy that I'm going to get different with here is I'm going to go back to him is Jason Kokrak. I mean, he had a really bad round one last week. He was in my main lineup. I did play the 4,444 last week. He was in my main lineup. He played bad in round one, but then he lit it up rounds 2 through 4, and he ended up finishing, I believe, top 10 possibly. Let's see here. Jason Kokrak last week finished 15th, which is pretty good for how bad he started. So he's coming in comparably super low owned. I'm seeing like 12% right now. So the pivot for me in this range is going to be Jason Kokrak. I think that he's had a great season. I think this is a good chance for him to cap off the end of his season. So I do like him, but I also, speaking chalk wise, I do like Sung Jae this week. He showed me something last week. He played well last week. Coming back to his best putting surface of Bermuda. He gets to, I believe, sleep in his own bed. He has a house in Atlanta, so I think he gets to sleep in his own bed this week. So that's a plus for him also. So I do like Sung Jae from a chalk perspective, and then from a pivot perspective, I like Jason Kokrak. Louis tough for me to click on. He's been nursing a back injury or a neck injury or something, but I'm not really there with Louis. If I was going to go between those guys, it'd probably be Brooks, maybe between Louis and Brooks. So in that range, so I don't know, but I do like Kokrak and I do like Sung Jae in this range.
Yeah, I mean, Kokrak's coming in with the lowest ownership, like at like 12, 13%. Na's
Mhm.
right there with them, and I can't get there with Na, especially
Yeah, I
with
can.
just the course setup and then his skill set. I don't see him being there. The guy that I really like in this range is Hideki. When you talk
Mhm,
about like good course history, Deki's got like a fourth, a fifth, and a ninth here over
mhm.
the last 5 years. So he's a guy that has shown that he can play well here. We talk about ball striking, how important that's going to be that week. This week, that's Hideki. His putting has been atrocious. I mean, this has to be his worst putting season that I can remember. He's putted terrible. I mean,
Yeah,
outside of the
it's
Masters,
awful.
which is the most difficult putting track there is on tour,
Yeah.
he's putted terribly. And
Even at the Masters, he putted well for like 9 holes. So like
yeah, exactly.
after that rain delay, he didn't miss a putt, and then that basically won him the tournament. So a bit besides that, he was pretty average at that tournament. So yeah, he is absolutely atrocious at putting. I think me and you might be better putters than him. Who knows? But
Yeah.
he's got to fix that somehow.
Yeah, yeah. And some of it could be just the fact that, he had a big year winning the Masters. There was a shitload of pressure of him in Tokyo for the Olympics. And it could just be the fact that he's just getting through this. They talk about fatigue, how long the season is, especially if you're playing from the first event all the way through the last. And so a lot of these guys are just, they're here, they're putting in their time, and they just want to get the hell out and take a break for a little while. So that could
Yeah.
be where Hideki is. But in terms of value, you're getting him at $6,400, so you can build a lot of different
Yeah.
lineups with Hideki at 6,400. And to me, there's not a ton of difference between him and some of the guys at the tier above. Like if you're telling me, Hideki's $2,000 cheaper than Sam Burns or Harris
Mhm.
English or Colin Morikawa, like I'll take that difference and live and die with Hideki on the greens, especially at a place like this.
Yeah, getting the Masters champion at 6,400 is pretty jarring, and we obviously know that why he's 6,400 is because he's starting off the tournament -1. But if Hideki goes out there and does an Hideki ball striking week and just puts average, I mean, he's going to shoot like 10, 12, 13 under possibly for the week, and that's great value. The way you win a GPP this week is figuring out who at the bottom here, like at even par or -1 or -2, is the guy that's going to shoot up the leaderboard and finish in the top 5 or top 10. I think a couple years ago it was Chez Reavie who started at even par and ended up finishing in like the top 5 or something like that. But that is the guy who you got to figure out who it is. Hideki could easily be that guy, but I'm looking at somebody a little bit lower than Hideki, but we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and drop down the sub $6,000, right, guys? Priced in the $5,000 range. We call it the dumpster. We're dumpster diving this week, but obviously there's some great names. Daniel Berger, who everybody loves, Joaquin Niemann, Sergio Garcia, who we even talked about, tweeted back and forth, looked so good through the first 5-6 holes on Sunday. Looked like he might make a run to contend. Stuart Sink, Billy Horschel, and then the hottest guy on tour right
Eric
now,
Van
Eric
Rooyen.
Van Rooyen, right? Mr. King putting. You want to talk about putting performance? This guy's been
Yeah.
riding the putter like Cantlay did all last week. But there's some names at this price range and some guys who have decent form and who are coming in very, very hot, who've played well at this place previously. So, at this area, there's really one or two names that people are gravitating to. It's Berger, it's Sergio Garcia. Who do you like down here below $6,000?
It's Berger for me. I'm all in on Berger this week. I think he is back on Bermuda, which is his best surface, and I think he really has a motivation to try to get on the Ryder Cup team. And I think his spot is very, very much in flux right now, and I think he needs a really good week. I think if Patrick Reed is healthy, I think that last spot kind of comes down to between Patrick Reed and Daniel Berger, and whoever plays better this week might actually get that last spot. But I love Berger this week. I think he is, a great value, and he's going to be my play from this part of the range. And I will say that I like Sergio also. It was fun. I kept saying going back to punishment with Sergio. I finally played him last week, and he finally freaking paid off.
He finally did, yeah.
Finally paid off. He finally was able to putt the damn ball. But if you want to speak about bad putters, Sergio is just as bad as Hideki. But Berger is my play. I get the Van Rooyen love. He makes lineups work, but his putting has just been it's been stupid. And if you're going to pivot off someone, I'd rather go to like Sink or Horschel or somebody like that.
Yeah, I mean, Stewart Sink's obviously a guy nobody's playing, right?
Yeah.
It's just nobody likes to play old man Stewart Sink. His course history has not been good. His form's been bad the last couple of tournaments. So I can see why nobody really wants to jump on board with that. The guy that I really like down here, oddly enough, is Billy Horschel. When you look back historically how he's played at Eastlake, and I'm saying long-term historics, he finished dead last year, I think last year or the year before in 30th place. But prior to that, he had a second. He won the damn thing, and he finished at 7th. So it's a place that he's very comfortable. You talk about ball striking. That is Billy Horschel. As long as he doesn't go nuclear, the guy's hotter than John Rahm, and he can go crazy in an instant. But Horschel's the guy that I like, and at $5,100, it gives you so much room to be able to make things a little bit different. And to your point, you can do a stack where you've got a guy like Rahm, Rory, and Xander, and then get a little bit funky and throw in a guy like Billy Horschel. And not only are you differentiating your lineup, but you're also giving yourself some ownership leverage from the fact that at $5,100, you can leave 1,000 on the board. You can leave 1,500 out there and still have a pretty damn good lineup in a GPP.
Yeah, we're in this is like Billy Horschel country. He loves Florida. He likes Atlanta, that area of the country. We've seen him win this tournament before, so we know he has good course history here. What are you thinking about Patrick Reed this week? I'm seeing 4% ownership. That's ridiculous to see for someone of Patrick Reed's caliber. I mean, I have the fear of a withdrawal. I mean, he could go there, maybe not have it for a couple days and just kind of withdraw from the tournament. Whatever, he finishes 30th, gets his $300,000 and goes home and goes back to resting. But that 4% number of ownership is pretty jarring. You could get him in some lineups. It's so cheap and be overweight in the field, and it could potentially win you a GPP. You know.
Yeah, I think if Patrick Reed is playing, and you talked about the narrative with the Ryder Cup, where basically that last spot's kind of in flux, and there's a number of guys who need to play well to earn their way onto the team. Sam Burns, Berger, and maybe even Reed. Like Reed was a lock for the Ryder Cup. Like
Yeah.
no one could imagine having the Ryder Cup without Patrick Reed, and then him hurting his ankle and then getting pneumonia, and all of a sudden now it's like he barely eked his way into Eastlake.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, he's going to have to show something this week if he wants to play in the Ryder Cup in a couple weeks. So,
Mhm.
I'm with you where if Patrick Reed comes in at 4 or 5% ownership at a place, like Eastlake, where we know he can play well and he's got motivation to play well, don't give Patrick Reed a reason to be the best version of P. Reed he can be. If he,
Yeah.
if he if he has to walk in there and be like, "Oh, I have to play my damn way onto the Ryder Cup team," okay, that to me is enough motivation to get him in there. So, if
Yeah.
Patrick Reed is in fact playing this week, I will find a way to work him into lineups, because I do think, there are just so many things that he does well, and the added motivation, that narrative to me, it propels him even further up the board in terms of the guys that are available down in this price range.
Yeah, just buyer beware on that. Just be aware that if you play Patrick Reed, he could easily withdraw or not play well because he has been sick for the last like couple of weeks. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if KH Lee doesn't hit the worst shot I've ever seen on 18 last week. My God, the guy hits an approach into the other side of the penalty area, and all he has to do is hit it on the green to make par, and he's in that 30th spot. Even Alex Noren, if he pars 18, I think he jumps Reed and doesn't get in. Reed doesn't get in, but somehow or another, both of those guys bogeyed the last hole. Reed sneaks in on the 30th spot, and now we're in this conundrum of whether or not we want to play him. So it's a tough decision. I probably am going to play him a little bit just because you can get. I'm not going to play him in anything like big or single entry or anything, but in like 150 build, get him in like 10, 15 lineups. Who cares? It wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, if he withdraws, hey, it sucks and those
Yeah,
lineups are dead. But it's one of those things. If he does play and he does play well, you're going to have such a massive benefit over everybody else.
yeah,
You mentioned KH Lee. I had KH Lee in my main lineup last week, and he was, I think, 4% owned in this big tournament that I was in. He was basically the reason why I was propelled. It was a 25,000 person tournament. I was
yeah.
propelled into the top 500. And I'd say, what if he does par or birdie that last hole, I go from like 500th place to like 200th place in that tournament. So it was a big swing, but finding, to your point, finding that guy way down the board that's going to make you a little bit different, that guy that starts at even or one under, that finds himself in the mix down the stretch, that's really the difference between taking down a big GVP and taking home some big money in some of those larger tournaments.
Yep, absolutely. And my guy this week is Daniel Berger, but I could easily see the pivot to Horschel or Patrick Reed or I guess Eric Van Rooyen, I guess, but he's garbage, I think.
Yeah, I'm out on EVR.
Mhm.
My gut check on him is he finishes dead last this week.
Yeah,
So,
I could
you know,
definitely see that.
yeah, I don't think, I think he's been riding such a hot putter, and it just doesn't feel like it's real to me. So, I mean, if I could get Stu Sink versus EVR in a head to head, I'd probably take Stu Sink in that matchup.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. But yeah, just good luck building lineups this week. It's a difficult week to build. Just leave money on the table. Try to get different. That's the only way you're going to win a GPP. Obviously, if you're playing cash games and playing head to heads or whatever, yeah, you can get as chalky as you want. Who cares there? But
Yep.
for the GPP lineups, just do your best to get different. You only have 30 people in the field. It's a weird week, but then in a couple of weeks we will be back to a normal full field and we'll be able to build lineups normally again. So yeah, last tournament of the year, we get a nice 1 week off season, and then it's the Fortnite Championship in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. So let's go down to our cards for the week, the last
Mhm.
betting cards of the 2021 season. For me, there are two ways that we talked about approaching this. It's betting the 72 hole score, or it's betting the guys with strokes. for me, I'm betting both places. I'm going to go without strokes on Rory, DJ, and Scheffler. I like the odds. I like the course history. I like the opportunity for those guys to go out and play well at a course that they've shown they can play well at. Scheffler finished fifth here last year, so I like Scotty a lot, especially that 25 number. With the strokes, I do like Cam Smith and Answer. I mentioned to you, Answer's just been playing fantastic. And there's just this thing in my head where I think now that him and Finau have broken through the winless drought, that both of those guys are now live again to win tournaments. And
Hmm.
Answer, with, 4 or 5 strokes in his pocket and how well he's been playing, getting him at 33 to 1 is a very, very good value to me. Finau's the other one that I'm not sure what to do with. Finau and Justin Thomas.
Hmm.
Thomas, you can basically get the same odds with strokes, without strokes. So, it's just a wonky betting board. But those are the 5 guys for me. Rick, who do you like this week?
Yeah, all my bets this week are without strokes. I'm not going to bet any of the guys with strokes. So I'm going to take the two best guys at this course, Rory and Xander, both 12 to 1. And then I'm going to drop down a little bit for Berger at 25 to 1, Sam Burns 33 to 1, and Sung Jae 33 to 1. Also, I bet the Euro Tour this week. A couple bets at the Italian Open. Got Guido. If we've been betting him on the PGA Tour. Let's bet him in Italy in his home country. So 25 to 1. Antoine Rosler 40 to 1. John Catlin 55 to 1. Minwoo Lee 55 to 1. And for some reason, everyone's betting Nicholas Colsaerts. I don't know why, but I just followed along everyone else. So 100 to 1. And then my free money play of the week. Unfortunately, we didn't get there last week. We're down to 2 to 1. We had a chance with Charlie Hoffman on Sunday. He just needed to shoot like 3 or 4 under on Sunday to get there and cash this ticket, but he couldn't do it. So we're going to go back to the well on a top 10 this week. Sam Burns, top 10, even money. Free money, cash that ticket. That is with starting strokes, by the way. So that bet is him starting already in the top 10 with the normal leaderboard and ending in the top 10.
Yeah, I like Burns a lot this week. Like I said, there's a lot to be played for, whether it's him, Berger, Reed, or even Scotty Scheffler. Imagine if Scotty Scheffler wins the tour championship. I could
Yeah.
see a case for him. He's kind of the new. We talked about Answer and Finau briefly, but he's that new guy that's like the best guy without a win
Mm-hmm.
going into next season. It's Scotty Scheffler. I
I
mean,
think that would propel him on the Ryder Cup team too.
you would think it would. I mean, with all the
Mhm.
top fives, how well he's played in WGCs and majors basically all year, if he wins the tour championship with, the field that obviously is going to be facing, I could see a case for him. So that
Mhm.
last spot, that last captain's pick is really up for grabs.
Yeah,
And, there's a number of guys that have a ton to play for this week. So
yeah.
I think Scheffler's one of those guys. I think Burns is another one that, it just, who knows what happens. Especially with the weird strokes dynamics baked into the tournament and the scoring.
Yeah, and also another thing this week, I think it's a good week to, like we always say every week, but I think this week is a good live betting week, just to see how guys are playing and seeing how the leaderboard shakes out after the
Yeah,
first couple rounds. So obviously, if we see anything that we like, we'll tweet it out. Me and Tony are usually pretty on track of that. So yeah, we'll see. I remember last week, I don't know if anyone was paying attention to our Twitter, but we had a wrong line on Aaron Rye in the Corn Ferry tournament. The guy was the highest ranked player in the field, and he was 2 strokes back going into the weekend. And the site that I bet at somehow, for whatever reason, hung 125 to 1 on him. And I tweeted it out, and I was like, oh my God, this is the wrong line. And I was like, I bet it. Everyone bet it. I mean, you might as well bet it. He ended up playing like shit on the weekend, but
yeah.
125 to 1 on that line was crazy. So I do like to scour the lines. I like to pay attention to the live lines, see if anything like that is the wrong number posted or a good value. So we'll tweet those out, obviously. So if you follow us on Twitter, you'll be able to catch those tweets and maybe get in on a winner.
Yeah, I mean, like Rick said, follow us on Twitter. We will be posting those live ads as the tournament unfolds. The tournament, it's just kind of wonky. It's weird. It's not a lot of fun. It's not super exciting. I mean, it's great golf, but it's ripe to be boring because we could have a guy like Patrick Cantlay or like DJ last year
Mhm.
who starts at 10 under and really just walks away with the tournament. I mean, he ended up winning by 3 or 4 strokes. So I don't know if Patrick Cantlay does that this week. I think if I was to say to take a guy like a pick in the tournament, I think John Rahm or Tony Finau are probably the two best guys to take in this tournament in terms of best
Mhm.
possibility, playing the best with some advantage to win and walk away this week. But at the odds, I think they're at like 3 and 6 to 1. You can't bet those numbers. It's unbettable. But
Yeah.
if we get into a circumstance where guys are making moves at the board and both of those guys maybe have a bad day, you could see odds even out live. And all of a sudden now maybe you're getting those guys at 15, 20, 25 to 1. And that's a great betting opportunity to hit live. So we'll obviously post that stuff out. Rick, any other thoughts just on the year, whether it's betting or golf, like most memorable moments? We saw, freaking, Phil Mickelson, senior PGA
Yeah. I
Tour
think
player, win a major championship. Tiger Woods obviously out basically the entire year with an injury, I'm excited to see what happens in 2 weeks when we get all these new Corn Ferry guys are getting promoted into the PGA Tour. We're gonna have a lot of new names, guys that we've never seen before
Mhm.
on the PGA Tour competing, who have played very, very well on the Corn Ferry Tour, and then a bunch of Euro guys who are going to backdoor their way into the PGA Tour next week as well, too.
Yeah, I'll be excited to go back to normal golf in a couple of weeks, and
Yeah,
we can debate on whether or not we want to play a chalky Brendan Steele at Napa like we usually do every
Yar
year. But
Emiliano Grillo.
or Million Grill, yeah. But I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, I like swing season stuff. I
Yep.
pay attention to golf all year round. But yeah, this year was spectacular. I thought the majors this year were just unbelievable. Hideki winning at the Masters was unbelievable. Phil, the iconic scene on 18 with the crowd almost trampling him on 18 was unbelievable. John Rahm's putts on 17 and 18 at the US Open were just that I was like, screw that tournament was awesome. I think that was probably my favorite tournament of the year,
Oh,
US
yeah.
Open. The back nine when everybody was in it, and then John Rahm shuts the door on Louis and wins that tournament was great. And then Colin Morikawa. I mean, the guy has been a stud for a while now, and I see plenty more majors in his future. He's halfway to a Grand Slam. Imagine if he wins the Masters next year, he's going to be 3/4 of the way to a Grand Slam already. So, yeah, I thought the majors this year were great. Outside the majors, I really liked last week's tournament. I thought that was probably the best tournament of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't remember many other major tournaments. The only other highlight for me was obviously the Valero Texas Open, just because I won 100 grand at that tournament. So that
That
was
would be a highlight for me as well,
yeah,
too.
that was a highlight for me. So that was a fun tournament for me. But just from a fan perspective, I thought this past week was probably one of the better tournaments of the year. And it was also nice seeing Tony Finau win a tournament this year. I love Tony Finau.
Yeah, I was gonna say for me, even though I did not bet at Finau winning, was probably one of the bigger highlights for me that you didn't mention. You talk about the majors. I think John Rahm finished inside the top 7 in every one of the majors this year.
Yeah.
The resurgence of Jordan Spieth. I've always made the argument that Jordan Spieth is kind of like Notre Dame football or the Dallas Cowboys. Like, it's more interesting when those teams are good, and
Mhm.
PGA golf is more interesting when Jordan Spieth is good. Like him, dislike him, whatever. When he is playing good golf, it makes the other sporting worlds kind of turn and pay attention to golf. So I think there's a lot to look forward to next year. And, I look forward to doing more of these shows with you. Speaking
Yeah,
of that,
absolutely.
we've got a couple new NFL shows that are going to be popping up. We're going to
Yeah.
do an NFC and an AFC pick show this week and next week. And then we'll also be doing a weekly NFL pick show that I think is going to come out on Tuesdays or Wednesday nights, where we'll pick me, you, and Chris will go through every one of the games for the week and pick the winners. So I'm excited to do that, as well
Yep.
as all of the other content that you and Chris will continue to do throughout the season for fantasy. And of course, Mike's stuff that he's doing on the weekends in and around the Buffalo Bills and everything that there is around Buffalo, the city of Buffalo, the food of Buffalo. I don't know why anybody cares about that, but hey, that's Mike's deal. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
So we'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk Fortnite Championship, and then we'll also discuss some Ryder Cup stuff there because we'll have the captain's picks by then. But until then, yeah, like Tony said, we have a football show coming out tomorrow for AFC win totals. We'll do NFC win totals next week, and we'll do a weekly pick show. So a lot of football content this next week as we're gearing up into week 1 of the season next week. So I will be in Vegas for week 1, so it will be pretty fun. Maybe I can throw a couple of pictures or maybe live broadcast in from Vegas or something like that if I'm not too drunk. So we'll see.
yeah, I imagine you're going to be so pickled you won't even know how to use your phone anymore. So
Yeah,
I
we'll
don't
see.
expect you to do anything there.
All right, Tony.
Well, cool, Rick. Hey, I appreciate it. Like we mentioned, like, sub, and contact, comment to us, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe to the Nickel City Mafia channel. Like Rick said, tons of comment all year. We appreciate it. Thanks very much, Rick. Appreciate you as always. Mike, thank you as well. Everybody have a good night, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. Enjoy the Tour Championship.